सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। We'll study the topic, the process of negation and assertion.
The process of negation and assertion. Brahman, the supreme reality, pervades the macrocosm and microcosm. Brahman is right within you. To locate Brahman, you need to go introvert. Seek your supreme self through the process of negation and assertion. Negate your material bodies. Assert your real self. Your present state is one of identification with the gross, subtle, and causal bodies. You have restricted your life to the experiences of these bodies and suffer from a self-imposed limitations. You need to liberate yourself from your terrestrial entanglement. Your focus of interest must move from the material equipments to your essential self. Negate the conditioning bodies. Assert your unconditioned self. Suggest to yourself powerfully that you are not the gross, subtle, and causal bodies, that you are the immaculate self. The ignorance of self is the cause of creation of the world. The variety show that appears before you is a mere passing phenomena. It is transient, perishable, in contrast to the eternal, imperishable Brahman. As you focus your attention upon the body, your physical personality arises. You relate to the gross objects of your senses. Just so, focusing upon the mind, your psychological personality shows up. You then relate to feeling and emotion. And when your focus is upon the intellect, your intellectual personality predominates. You identify more with thought and idea. You must rise above the limitations of the body, mind, and intellect, and attune yourself to the underlying self that enlivens them all. Concentrate, meditate upon your real self. The show of object, emotion, and thought folds back. You become established in the self. You merge with the self, Atman, Brahman. Do away with your infatuation to this phenomenal world. Shift your concentration upon the self, the supreme God. You have cast away a treasure and picked up trash. God resides in you. Realize yourself. You will then realize there exists nothing other than God. That is the stern reality. Prophet Muhammad declares, La ilaha illallah. There exists nothing but God. So do Christ, Krishna, and the rest of that galaxy. Vedanta roars with this truth. You innocently put more faith in the outward phenomena than the reality that supports it. You make the world more real than God. You have hypnotized yourself to believe in the reality of the world. Your involvement in the world has caused only suffering and sorrow. You must now direct your energy and strength to the self within. Get to the eternities, the supreme God. Feel that, live that. Get lost in God as a cube of sugar in water. You will attain spiritual enlightenment, absolute peace and bliss. The metaphor of butter permeating milk explains the immanent nature of Brahman. Brahman exists everywhere, permeates every part of the world, yet remains incognizable. As butter in milk. Butter exists in milk, though not seen directly. The process of extracting butter from milk is strikingly similar to drawing the knowledge of Brahman from the world. Mix a bit of yogurt with lukewarm milk. Leave the mixture overnight. Next morning, the milk turns into yogurt. Milk is thin, fluid. Yogurt is thick, firm. Churn the yogurt with cross ladle. Butter separates. Apply the same process to yourself. The mind is ever in a fluid state. It runs in all directions. Give yourself a little Vedantic knowledge. Allow yourself some time to react with the philosophy. The mind stabilizes, turns mature. Churn the mind by negating the outer phenomena and asserting the inner self. Thus, reflecting and meditating upon the self, you gain knowledge of self.
The process of negation and assertion. The reality is not seen, the unreal is seen. The reality is not known, the unreality is known. So what is negation and assertion? Negate the unreal and assert the real. That is the process. The technique that the Upanishad discusses about this negation, you find Brihadaranyaka Upanishad talking about this quite a few times. In fact, Brihadaranyaka talks about it 4 times. Neti, neti, neti. That's where you find the first reference of the process of negation in that Upanishad. And then you find a lot of references in Yoga Vasishta and other textbooks much later. So the Upanishadic reference starts with Brihadaranyaka, where they talk about neti. Neti is the process of negation. For us, we studied this in verse number 30, Atma Bodha. Neti neti iti vakyataha. We studied that in Atma Bodha, where by using this technique of neti, neti, neti. Neti means na iti. Not this. Not this. Not this. Is this real? Neti. Is this real? Neti. Is this real? Neti. This technique is called the process of negation. Now, what you have to negate and what you got to assert. The conditionings is what you have to negate. The oneness you want, oneness is that which you should assert. What you should negate and what you should assert. What all you should negate? Negate that which isn't there. What all isn't there, you negate. What you should assert, the aikyam, the oneness is what you have to assert. When we say asserting, we have seen this any number of times. When we say asserting, knowledge is not giving us anything new. Knowledge only reveals the ever-present Brahman. So when you are asserting something, you are asserting that which is there already. That has to be very clear. That has to be very clear. It's not that you are asserting, you are doing something and asserting. Asserting the ever-present and negating the temporary. This is the process of negation and assertion. So it means lot of knowledge is required about the temporary so that you can negate. What all is knowledge? Okay, what all is temporary? Chapter 3, verse number 42, Bhagavad Gita. He quotes a verse from Kathopanishad, which occurs 4 times in Kathopanishad. Indriyani paranyahuhu indriyebhyah parammanah manasastu parabuddhehe yo buddhehe paratastu saha. Verse number 42, chapter 3 reference. And that verse itself is repeated 4 times in Kathopanishad in 2 different sections, where he is talking about the order of subtlety in which you got to go negating. So what all got to be negated? The body, the senses, the mind, the intellect. All got to be negated. What all got to be negated? The body, the senses, the mind, the intellect. These 4 got to be negated. How do you negate the 4? By recognizing the 5th. Yo buddhehe paratastu saha. Saha, he is superior to these 4. He is subtler than the 4, is what that verse talks about. So the process of negation and assertion is very clearly established, explained in a lot of Upanishads. It's very clearly explained in these Upanishads. And how did they explain it? They explained what unreal is. By explaining what unreal is, you are told to negate that. The explaining the unreal is not to assert it. Explaining the unreal is to say it is not. So what is the unreal? The unreal is analyzed in 2 ways. The world is analyzed as unreal. The Jiva, the individual, is analyzed as unreal. So 2 ways, 2 analysis is done. One is about the world. Another kind of analysis is about the Jiva, the individual. Introvert means you have left the world and started the negation internally. That's what the shift from extrovert to introvert. Extrovert means the attention outside. Introvert means attention inside. Extrovert means one whose focus is on outside. Okay. What makes a person to focus on the outside? A person will focus on the outside as long as he believes, he understands. Happiness can come from the world only. As long as that conviction is there, happiness can come from the world only. That person's focus will be extrovert only because he believes happiness is coming from there. No. So the process of negation and assertion starts from where? The process of negation and assertion starts from this fundamental point. What is the fundamental point? All human beings are seekers. And what are they seeking? All human beings are seekers. Seekers. What are they seeking? In and through what they are seeking, they are ultimately seeking a purnatvam. A completeness is what they are seeking. So all human beings are seekers of completeness, fullness, purnatvam. First point that we have to be very clear is how all human beings are seekers of purnatvam first. This is a very important step. Once we understand how all human beings, including every one of us here, is seekers of purnatvam, then we will understand where it is and where it should not be searched for. Once we understand all of us are seeking for purnatvam, we will know where not to look for it and where to look for it. Where not to look for it in the external world, where to look for it internally. And when you come internally, where do you come? Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah parammanah Kathopanishad verse. I am not quoting the Kathopanishad section, I am quoting the Bhagavad Gita section because it is the same verse that appears in verse 42, chapter 3. Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah parammanah manasastu parabuddhehe yo buddhehe paratastu saha. Saha he, saha means he. Yo buddhehe paratastu saha. He is superior to the intellect also. It means what? Down the line from the world to the intellect is negated. From the external world to the intellect, all are negated. And when you are negating it, even though predominantly it is only negation, we talk about certain indicative definitions of Brahman. Using that, you can assert. For we do not know what to assert. How can we assert that we do not know? But we assert it on the authority of the Shastras, on the pramanam of the Shastras. Since it is said in the Shastras, it is an independent pramanam, therefore I use it to assert. So, using the intellect, I negate the world and I come up to the intellect. Using the intellect, I can negate the world and also I can come up to the level of the intellect using the world. But what I do here is what? Assertion. So assertion is one portion and negation is another portion. So the focus should be on the negation first and then we move on to the assertion. And what is the technique? Neti is the technique. Neti is the technique. What is it that you are seeking? All human beings are seekers. It is understood. Then the question, what are we seeking? Assertion and negation. Am I seeking wealth? It looks like I am seeking wealth. Am I seeking wealth? Neti. No, I am not seeking wealth. Name, fame, power, position, status, family, wealth. It looks like I want these 7. A combination of all this. 1 or 2 proportionately high, but a little bit of everything. So, a little bit of everything is what I am seeking. Okay. Having said that, now it is clear. What are we seeking? These 7 we are seeking. Now, are we seeking these 7 so that it will give me purnatvam, completeness? The mind hopes that it will get. The mind believes, the mind hopes that if it gets these 7, it will feel complete. Neti, not this. You don't get, you will get the 7. Name, fame, power, position, status, family, wealth, all that you will get. It's not that you will not get these 7. This 7 you will get. But what you will not get? Purnatvam you will not get. So getting this 7 is not getting Purnatvam. Therefore you negate. Now what do you negate? You negate Purnatvam. So you negate this 7 by saying Neti, Neti, Neti. So first step is to recognize what you are seeking. Second step is an understanding what you are seeking is not available here. What you are seeking is not available here. That is the second step. The third step is then where is it? That's where you leave the world and you look inside. From extroversion, you turn introvert. When you turn introvert, where will be your first focus? Your first focus will be on the body. When you turn introvert, when you start paying attention, your first attention will be on the body. Then you say Neti. To the body, you say Neti. From the body, where will you go? To the senses. Because subtler than the body is the senses. Subtler than the senses is the mind. Subtler than the mind is the intellect. Up to intellect you can come. After that you will not know what to do. After that you cannot use the intellect to go any further. Therefore, what do you do at this point? You take the Shastra Pramanam at this point. You take the Shastra Pramanam at this point and you negate the intellect also and assert the self. This is how the process is done. From the extroversion to the introversion. Seekers of what? Seekers of longevity of pleasure and the quality of pleasure. When we are seeking, we are seekers of what? Seekers of the pleasure must be everlasting, the longevity. Also, it should be of a very high quality. So, the quality of pleasure and the longevity of pleasure is what we are seeking. Sukha Prapti, it is called. This is called Sukha Prapti. Distinct and different from that is Dukkha Nivritti. So there is Dukkha, you do something to get over the Dukkha. You are hungry, that hunger causes Dukkha. You eat food, you are free from the Dukkha, the sorrow. It's very hot, not inside, outside also is very hot, isn't it? Inside is hot, outside is hot. So what do? That external heat is causing Dukkha. So what do? I keep the remote, where is it? Somewhere here. I keep the remote next to me. The air conditioner remote. Wherever the Dukkha becomes, I switch it on. Dukkha goes, pleasure comes. So, what is it that the human beings are seeking? The human beings are seeking avoidance of pain completely and the longevity and quality of pleasure. It's called Dukkha Nivritti and Sukha Prapti. Seekers of avoiding Dukkha and seekers of courting pleasure. In order to, where does one get it is the starting point of assertion and negation. In fact, starting point of negation is that. Where do you get it? Where you will not get it. Once you realize where you will not get it, what you will do? You will stop chasing that. When you realize you are not going to get it there, you will stop chasing it. No, sir, I don't get it, but for others it is there. No. If it is not there for you, if it will not be there for anybody else. No, sir. Actually, sir, wealth and all I don't need, sir. I'm doing it only for the sake of the children. If wealth is useless to you, it is useless to them also. It is useful to you, it appears useful to them. Something cannot be useless, meaningless to you and meaningful to another, because it is useless universally. This understanding helps you to negate the world. This understanding helps you to negate the world. So when you negate the world, you are not disturbed by the world, you are not agitated by the world, you are not irritated by the world, you negate it because what you are seeking cannot be found there. That's how we evolve, we transcend from the world, not out of irritation or affectation or frustration. We leave the world behind because we understand that what we are seeking cannot be found there. That's all the point. What we are seeking cannot be found there. Since what I am seeking cannot be found there, what will I do? I leave this behind. Since we know only this, we keep searching here again and again and again. Because we know only this. What is the only thing that we know? We only know the world. Since we know only the world, we keep searching here again and again and again. So what is the first step of negation? Remember the Upanishadic example. The lady searching for the needle. The lady is searching for the needle on the road. The passerby came and asked the lady, what are you searching? She said, I am searching for the needle. He asked, where did you lose it? No, I lost it in the house. Then why are you searching here? There is no light in the, for you to search you need light. No. The lady asked this question. For you to search you need light. Where there is light only you will search. Where is light? On the street. Therefore I am searching in the street, and that lady will never find the needle. The lady will never find the needle. Why? Because you got to find it out where you lost it. Search where you lost it. Then it takes to the highest level and says, actually you didn't lose it and all, you are temporarily imagining a loss. It is an imaginary loss. That is assertion. What is assertion? It's not that you have lost and you are going to regain. The loss itself is an imaginary loss. That's why knowledge doesn't create anything new. It only says what you think you have lost is imaginary. It is an imaginary loss. But for that person who is extroverted, he cannot relate with this idea. He cannot relate with this idea of imaginary loss and all that. He will say, no, sir. Once you experience it, you will know it, he will say. Only if you experience it, you will know. What is it that you have to experience? You do not know the value of the world. You do not know what pleasure the world gives. Vedanta comes and says, there is no pleasure at all there. Even that pleasure that you are finding is reflected happiness. Happiness comes from your inner self only. For bliss is only internal. It is a reflection, and you are misunderstanding the reflection to be real. Just as the oyster shell and the snake and the rope. Remember the two examples? The two examples of misunderstanding is, the first example of misunderstanding is the shell is misunderstood for silver. In another example, the rope is misunderstood for snake. In the example where the shell is misunderstood for silver, you develop raga for silver. In that example where you misunderstand the rope to be the snake, you develop dvesha. So raga and dvesha evolves out of a misunderstanding. All this knowledge helps you to negate. All this knowledge helps you to negate. Therefore, the process of assertion and negation. So what all you negate? First we negated the world. And then we come on to the body, the Jiva. And what is the Jiva? Various, the anatomy of the Jiva, the physiology of the Jiva, the psychology of the Jiva, all that is analyzed and negated. What is the anatomy of the Jiva? Jnanendriyas, Karmendriyas and all the anatomy. The eyes, these are all the anatomy. And then there is the pranas, that is the physiology. And then the psychology, the mind, the intellect, the three gunas. All this is the psychology. You know all this so that you can negate it. So what all you negate now? Body, mind, intellect. The gross body, the subtle body, the causal body. The five koshas you negate. What are the five koshas? The Annamaya kosha, the Pranamaya kosha, the Manomaya kosha, the Vijnanamaya kosha, the Anandamaya kosha. You negate the five. And then there are, the individual goes through the three states of consciousness. Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Negate the three. You have the conviction on the Shastra Pramanam to negate, because when they have discussed, when they have discovered so much about what the world is and what the individual is, which is so clear, so precise, so perfect, you infer what they talk about Atman, Brahman also must be correct. That's where Shastra becomes the Pramana. Vijay, are you able to follow? Since they say so much about the world, and all that they say about the world is perfect, complete, very precise, very analytical, very logical, very scientific. And what all they talk about the individual is also very, very precise, very analytical, very logical, very scientific. Since all that they are saying is so perfect, what they talk about Brahman also has to be perfect only. That Shraddha is the assertion. That Shraddha on the Shastram is the Pramanam to talk about Brahman is the assertion. So, the process. What is the process? Assertion and negation. With this background, we will read the what he is saying in the text, because this is the premises on which this topic has come. The process of negation and assertion. The first paragraph talks about suggest yourself powerfully that you are not the gross, subtle and causal bodies, that you are the immaculate self, etc. All that he says, suggest yourself powerfully. For you to suggest it powerfully, you need an authority. And Shastram is that authority. You have restricted your life to the experience of these bodies. And this restriction is a self-imposed limitation. This is pure Vedanta. The limitation is a self-imposed limitation. Why the limitation is self-imposed? Originally you are Purnam, no? Originally who you are, what you are, Purnam, whole, complete, full. Since you are originally Purnam, from where did this notion of Apurnatvam come from? That's because of ignorance. Knowledge removes that ignorance. That's because of ignorance. The ignorance of the self, that's the second paragraph. The ignorance of the self is the cause of creation of the world. It is ignorance that creates it. It is ignorance that causes it. It is ignorance that creates it. The variety show that appears before you is a mere passing phenomenon. It is transient, perishable, in contrast to the eternal, imperishable Brahman. You focus on something, you become that. You focus on something, you become that. When the focus is on the body, the physical personality arises. You relate to the gross objects of your senses. When you identify, when you focus upon the mind, your psychological personality shows up. What is a psychological personality? Emotions. Emotions show up. You will be, at the physical personality, you will be so concerned and worried about the objects and beings. At the emotional personality, you will be so concerned and worried about the emotions. What is the concern about emotions? What is that concern? How many people wishes you? How many don't wish you? How many recognizes your presence? How many don't recognize your presence? Emotional personality shows up because you have identified with the emotions. If you identify with the intellect, intellectual personality shows up. What does intellectual personality means? Identifying with thoughts and ideas. Your thoughts becomes more powerful. Your ideas and ideologies becomes more powerful. You must rise above the limitations. In order to rise above the limitations, you must understand the limitations and negate it. How would you rise above it? You understand the limitations of it and then rise above it. So much of knowledge is required to understand the limitations of it. So 85% of Vedantic knowledge will be about negation. 85% of Vedantic knowledge is about negation. And that 15%, they talk about the reality Brahman, is to bring about Shraddha. Why? Because even Vedantic words also cannot completely tell you what Brahman is, but it can give you the Shraddha. Therefore, that 15% of what they talk about Brahman is to bring about the Shraddha of Brahman, and 85% is to negate Neti, 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 Na iti. Neti means Na iti. Na not. Iti, this, not this. Iti means this. Sometimes iti can mean that also. Not this, not that. Not this, not that. So all that is known is negated. All that is known is negated. When all that is known is negated, what remains is the real. Very difficult is to negate. Why? Because of infatuation with the phenomenal world. Infatuation. Infatuation because of long association. Infatuation because of long association, and infatuation because of the belief that happiness lies here. That's all. It boils down to that. The moment you realize your happiness is not here, you will anybody will drop it. A person is holding on to it only because of the belief that happiness is here. If happiness is not there for you, you should realize happiness is not there for anybody. You can't say it is not there only for me, sir, but for my family, children and all, rules are different. For me, there is no happiness in the world, but for my children and family and all, happiness lies only in the world. If it is poison for you, it is poison for everybody. And what is that poison? Infatuation is poisonous. What is poisonous? Infatuation is poisonous. And what is infatuation? The treasure is lost and trash is picked. The diamond is thrown away and the pebbles is collected. Ignorance. Again, one of the Dharma Shastras gives this example. The traveler reaches the river early hours of the morning. So he's waiting for the sunrise so that he can get into the river and do the morning prayers, etc. So he's waiting. So when he's waiting, he's getting bored. So what he did, he found a whole lot of pebbles. Just to do time pass, what he was doing, one by one, he was throwing it in the river. One by one, he was throwing it in the river. When he picked up and threw the last pebble, the sun rose. What he saw, it's all diamonds that he was throwing it into the river, not realizing it to be the diamond. So, the person loses the treasure. Why? Because he doesn't understand that it's a treasure. And collects the trash. It means what? Technically, the useless is taken up and the useful is thrown out. To put it very simply, useless is taken up and the useful is thrown away. The useful is thrown away for the useless. Who will do that? Who will do this? Only an ignorant person will do that. An ignorant person will throw the useless. He will throw the useful for the useless. So what are you to negate now? Negate the useless and assert the useful. That's all the process of negation and assertion. You are not doing any big thing here. You are just being very normal when you are doing it. You are just simply using your common sense when you are doing that. What? You are getting rid of the useless so that you can accommodate the useful. More conviction and more faith is put on the world than on God. More faith and conviction is upon the world, not on the reality, not on God. You make the world more real than God. You make the world more real than God. Why? Because you have, because of long association, you have started to believe in the reality of the world. The moment you give it a reality, you cannot let go of it. Or in order to let go of something, you got to understand it as temporary. Only when you understand something as temporary, you will let go of it. And everything in relation to the world is temporary, including your physical body. Everything that is related to the world is temporary. So you can let go of it only when you understand the temporary as temporary. So assert, negate the temporary and assert the reality. Assert the reality and negate the temporary. Any identification with the temporary will cause suffering. It's a law. You cannot identify with the temporary and be happy. It's not possible. All identification, any identification with the temporary will cause suffering. It's a law. On what basis we say it is a law? Because when the real nature of it shows up, what is the real nature of it? It is limited. It is temporary. What you thought it can give, it cannot give. When you understand all this, what will happen? You will drop it. You want it. When you want it, why do you want it? Because you see a benefit in that. That's why you want it. When you want something, you see a benefit, isn't it? And what is that benefit? It will help you in your search. What is the search? The search for completeness. Under all circumstances, you want to feel full, complete, perfect, purnatvam. That's why this lesson started with the invocatory, Isavasa invocatory prayer, where we spent enough time on this purnatvam. That purnatvam is the seeking. One person believes purnatvam means some attainment. Each and every attainment results in sorrow. Why all attainments will result in sorrow? All attainments will result in sorrow because attainment means you didn't have it, you have to get it. Anything that you get will be lost. Anything that you acquire will be, all acquisitions will be lost. Yavana Garvam, they say, no? When the person is young, youth, it is difficult to accept what we call as Yavana Garvam. It is difficult to accept that body will become diseased, old. It is impossible to accept. Even though they see it, Even though they understand it, they cannot accept it. This is called ignorance. This is called ignorance. And this ignorance manifests as what? Ignorance manifests as raga, dvesha. You can call it as kama or you can call it as raga and dvesha. Kama means desire. Jahishatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Chapter 3. Conquer this enemy in the form of desire. Jahishatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Which is hard to conquer. Durasadam means it is very hard to conquer, but you have no other choice also. It is very hard to conquer. Abdina utralama sir. No, you have no other option also. You have to conquer. Jahishatrum. Jahishatrum mahabaho kamaru. So, how does ignorance manifest? Because we can understand the disease through symptoms only in the initial stages. Once you have mastered it, you know the disease, you know the source of the disease. In the initial stages, you can only understand it through the symptoms. Symptomatic treatment only comes in the beginning. And what are the symptoms? Raga Dvesha is the symptoms. Okay, when you say Raga Dvesha is the symptom, again that is also difficult to comprehend. That we boil it down further and say the 5 are the symptoms. What are the 5? Krodha, Lobha, Mada, Matsarya, Bhaya. These 5 are the symptoms. What are the 5? Krodha, Lobha, Mada, Matsarya, Bhaya. These 5 symptoms are the indication of the disease ignorance. And this ignorance is because of a wrong identification. What is the wrong identification? The wrong identification is Purnatvam can be gotten from the external. In the analysis, what is external and what is internal? Up right from the external world of objects and beings to the intellect, all are external. Again, right from the external objects and beings to the intellect, up to the intellect, all are external only. So you negate all that is external. When all that is negated, what remains is the reality. Assert that. And what is asserting that? Ramakrishna Paramahamsa example is given here. Like the cube of sugar in water. How the cube of sugar dissolves in water. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's example. He says, like the cube of sugar in water. How does it dissolve? Any drop of water, anywhere you taste, it will be sweet. And you will not see the sweet, you cannot see the sugar, but it permeates, it pervades, it permeates, it pervades. Better example is how butter permeates the milk. And this butter extracting, the metaphor of butter permeating milk, we have seen it any number of times. And still it is worth seeing it again and again and again. Brahman exists everywhere, just as butter exists everywhere. In the milk, obviously. Butter exists everywhere in the milk. Yet remains incognizable. Though it is there, it is not cognizable. Butter exists in milk, though not seen directly. Though you don't see it directly, it permeates. The process of extracting butter is similar to the process of gaining knowledge. What is the process of extracting butter? Whatever the process is. Lukewarm milk, add a little bit of yogurt. The milk should not be too hot nor too cold. It should be at the right lukewarm temperature. Mix a bit of yogurt nicely. You mix it and leave it. Leave the mixture overnight. Next morning, the milk turns into yogurt. The fluid milk has turned into a thick yogurt curd. Churn it with the ladle. That churning is the assertion and negation. That churning. Churning is the negation and assertion. And when you churn, what happens? Butter separates. Butter separates, and you can take that, and you can take the butter will be floating on top. You can, it gets separated. You can use it. Mind is ever in a fluid state. It will run in all directions. Little bit of knowledge, little bit of knowledge, little bit of knowledge stabilizes the mind. Stable mind is the mature mind. Stable mind is the mature mind. That mature mind is fit for reflection, contemplation, meditation to gain the knowledge of the self. And all Vedantic literature talks about churning. They all talk about churning. They talk about churning the Milky Ocean. They talk about churning. And Krishna was constantly, he's the thief, no? He steals the, he doesn't steal the milk. He doesn't steal the yogurt. He steals the butter. The essence you take and keep, he will simply come and take the essence away. So all this literature you find is about this churning. What is this churning? Churning is the process of assertion and negation. And it's not a painful process. People misunderstand it to be a painful process. It's not a painful process at all. Why it will not be painful? Because you are negating the useless and asserting the useful. When you are discarding the useless, why it will be painful? You are not discarding it because you still consider it as useful. Like he gives example, people can't throw away the used broomstick also, no, he says, isn't it? Even the used broomstick will not be thrown away. Why? It will be useful. How one went and all is not the problem. It will be useful. Therefore, you cannot let go because you consider it as useful. Useful for what? Useful in dukkha nivritti and sukha prapti. That's why you keep it. Are you able to follow? You keep it because you find it useful. You keep it. You find it useful. Why do you keep it? Why do you find it useful? Because it talks about dukkha nivritti and sukha prapti. Negation and assertion says all this cannot be gotten from the external, and you get it from extroversion. You have to turn introvert. From extrovert, turn introvert. So extroversion means leaving the world behind and then turning introvert. And what is turning introvert? Negating the body, negating the senses, negating the mind, and negating the intellect. One verse you should remember, you can capture the entire thing. Verse number 42, chapter 3. Indriyani paranyahuhu indriyebhyah param manah manasastu parabuddhehe yo buddhehe paratastu saha. Saha he is subtler than everything. Saha he means, saha means he refers to Brahman, Atman. He refers to Brahman there. That is subtler than everything. Very important verse that talks about the assertion and negation. With this, we conclude this topic of assertion and negation. Next week, we'll continue with the next topic, the idea of Trinity. Next week, we'll continue with the idea of Trinity. We conclude for